Joining me now is friend of the show, Miles Taylor, former Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security and author of BlowBack, a warning to save democracy from the next Trump. Miles, as always, thank you very much for being here. Congratulations on the book, even though it is horrifying why you had to write the book. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, part of it, Jonathan, was born out of frustration. Frustration because what we've really seen from ex-Trump officials the past few years is a slew of memoirs, self-congratulatory memoirs in many cases, about all the great ways that they protected the country. What we really need is a forecast into the future, Jonathan, about what to expect if there is another term of Donald Trump in the White House, or what I call a savvier successor, a MAGA copycat, because Americans can use that information to make really important decisions here in the next 15 or so months before we choose the next president. So that's what I wanted to do, is provide that clear-eyed forecast. And unfortunately, it was quite gloomy.
And in fact, to your point about forecasting into the future, you write, Trumpism is a political philosophy that seeks to achieve far-right populist goals by defying democratic institutions and weaponizing government power for partisan purposes. It has spread like a disease, infecting a rising generation of copycats. Reading that, you had to have submitted this book about 6 months ago in order for it to come out now. What's interesting about reading that line is that we just had a story come out in the New York Times about how a second Trump term is already being crafted, and they're already talking about doing the things you're warning in that sentence I just read.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm going to be really blunt today about what my conclusions were after 2 years of talking to ex-Trump officials from the cabinet level all the way down to staff assistants that were footsteps from the Oval Office. And if I was going to sum up what these people told me, it would be that a second term of Trump would equal the Third Reich. Now, of course, I'm making a connection to the Nazi Party that ruled Germany, which just a couple of years ago, a statement like I just made would have been unimaginably reckless in my mind. But now it's a sober-minded, clear-eyed forecast based on what his own loyalists have told me they would do. What does that look like? What are they saying they would do? Well, they would use the powers of the government to spy on rivals. They would use the powers of the government to prosecute political opponents, to administer loyalty tests to federal employees, to gerrymander the federal courts in their favor, to deploy Department of Homeland Security forces into Democratic cities to exert control, to invoke the Insurrection Act, to withhold federal aid, emergency aid from cities that need it, to purge the deep state, to regulate the media. It goes on and on and on. And you hear these things. And Jonathan, at that point, it doesn't become reckless. It becomes responsible to draw a parallel to foreign dictatorships.
Miles, toward the end of your book, you write, and I want to quote, "Truth is the final guardrail of our collective democracy, and we each individually control its fate." How can we use the truth to preserve our democracy?
Well, one of the things that was really disturbing to me, Jonathan, is I spent a lot of time talking to our nation's democracy scholars, people like Larry Diamond at Stanford and Jonathan Haidt at NYU, people I consider sort of democracy doctors. And when they parse through the data, one of the really alarming things is you see that it's not just senior Republicans who are saying one thing in private about Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, that it's a disaster and a threat, and then saying another thing in public. That self-censorship is happening nationwide. So surveys show that the majority of Americans now misrepresent their public opinions when they're talking to other people and keep their actual opinions private. Now, what was worrying, Jonathan, is the one cohort that doesn't keep their opinions private was people on the far political extremes, especially the far right. So extremists are willing to tell you what they really think, but the moderate majority of Americans are not. And how do we overcome that self-censorship? Well, it sounds really pedestrian. It sounds like a kindergarten lesson, but it's that we just start speaking out. When more people speak out, it lowers the price of dissent for everyone else. And really, in my mind, that's the only way we can safeguard our democracy, is make sure we're not self-censoring the truth.
Yeah, Miles, we have less than 30 seconds left. You write, in truth, there were no heroes inside the Trump administration, only survivors. You write that in the prologue, which is quite harrowing for someone I've talked to like this for years, to read your experience in black and white truly was breathtaking. And my final question to you is this: how are you?
Look, no one's got to have any sympathy for me. It was a rough road after the Trump administration, but I hope that people see my experience as a cautionary tale. And that cautionary tale, and it's ironic coming from me, is that anonymity is the biggest threat to our democracy. We have to attach our real concerns to our names and speak out. If we don't, we are going to make a grave civic mistake in 2024, and I hope people wake up to the severity of the danger, Jonathan.
Miles Taylor, thank you, as always, for coming to the show. Thank you for writing this book.
Thanks, my friend.